With debate number 5, open knowledge for all MOOCs and patient communities. And I'll call upon Michel Chekroun, Enguerrand Delannoy, Pierre Dellenbourg, Gérard Friedlander, Julien Kouchner, and the debates will be led by Antoine Flau. Right, well, good morning to everybody. I propose that with no further ado and without waiting to start the debate, we'll take a look first of all at the video that is proposed. Who's still afraid of the big bad MOOCs? When the first online courses for all made an appearance in 2008, most people were very skeptical. Some denounced a marketing approach by the English-speaking universities, others predicted that it was just going to be a fashion fad. 5 years later, the MOOCs are more than ever part of our everyday life and of the future. In medicine, they even appear to be a response to certain needs. In some of the developing countries, these lectures date back to colonial times. And for the students to be able to follow a MOOC given by the University of Harvard of Cambridge is an opportunity to catch up. In Africa, there's a lot at stake for the MOOCs. A MOOC on Ebola, for example, can easily improve the knowledge and the practices of the carers without having to get a European expert to come over. A video on the screen that goes out, dehumanization, is often presented as the price to pay for this revolution in teaching. But it's not entirely true. MOOCs generate lively debates on discussion forums related to the lectures. You can often see a hodgepodge of knowledgeable questions from students in urology and some rather naive queries from the man in the street who's just had a prostate operation. Like the patient community forums, each person finds what they need. The patient and the curious acquire a little more theory, which is reassuring, whilst the doctors get information and training. The patient on an equal footing with the doctor without ever having gone through the door of medical school? No, because the patient, even if he is well informed, will never have all the value a doctor has, his experience. As Einstein said, knowledge without experience is just information.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. The word MOOC is not something that everybody knows now, massive open online course. A question to Pierre, who is the Mr. MOOC, if I can say so, of the Federal Polytechnic School in Lausanne. I have the impression that people get very, very bored sitting behind a computer for a lecture. Do you know just one person who really does stay there sitting for 2.5 hours on a chair looking at a lecture? Well, first of all, compared to what happens in the lecture halls where you stay for hours on a chair listening to a lecture, the teacher is smaller from the end of the hall than when you see him or her on your iPhone. And we don't do very long videos. We do 5 or 6 minute videos. And those who are fortunate enough to go
on the campus have beer, the lake, and can make babies. But everybody's not fortunate enough to be able to go to the campus, even if there are a lot of French people who do, too many in some cases. But as they said in the video, the professors receive really enthusiastic videos saying, I followed your course, I'd like to meet you so much. So people who are not on the campus but who are online, some people may see this just as something rather unhuman, but others do build up a relationship. And it's got as much affect to it as in the real world. People meet on the internet, things happen on the internet, and there's 633 babies who were born last year who were called Skype. Actually, that's not true. I've just invented it. The world of internet is something really rich. It's human. And even people who are not on the campus say, well, you do Scala's MOOC, you in Paris, and we'll meet at a cafe. There's always a physical dimension, even in online learning. Gérard Friedlander, the medical school in the center of the Latin Quarter in Paris, it seems a bit sad to follow the lectures at home in your pajamas. You can't go to the cafe with your friends. You're not on the edge of the lake or the edge of the Seine. Is that the university of the future? Is that the revolution we can expect? Well, one of your predecessors wanted to get the faculty online, and all of the lectures are going to be filmed, videoed, and all the students will be able to consult his lectures online. And I took a look at the list of people who actually looked at them. It's miserable. Why? Well, for the reason that Antoine has just stated. That's to say that they took a look at the lectures for an hour and a half. They looked at a lecture from somebody who's difficult to watch for an hour and a half in a lecture hall. So when you're online, it becomes torture, and you can't keep the same format if you're going to do it digitally. For us, reality is rather far away from MOOCs. In other words, we need to change quickly, and we need to change the way we teach. As if we taught people how to teach. Nobody ever taught teachers how to teach. But anyway, we need to go on to tools that'll be different. We have the platform which is called Moodle, and the students use that platform extensively, but in initial training for medical students at medical school, certainly not MOOCs. That doesn't mean for as much that the tools that have been developed for MOOCs cannot be used. Of course they can. But in a faculty, we need operators for the contents and also for the containers. And it's not people from the faculty for either. So we need people to develop the courses for us. And then on the basis of that, we've got to change the way we divide the lectures up and make them more concise so that the students don't live in a totally different world at medical school as the world they live in when they leave it. We've got to make things congruent. Yes, Pierre? I think you probably are forgetting the other audience. We have 10,000 students, and we've exceeded that number in online students. So you've got to think about the people in Donetsk under the bombs whose university is closed, and they can have access to our MOOC. And to talk about our students, there are some professors who have the ex cathedra lectures, and they've kept them. And then you've also got the challenge on the campus. It's very difficult to do, but some professors have made the effort. They'd say to the students, you look at the video at home by 10-minute excerpts, and we'll do something a little more interactive on the campus. When there are 300 students, it's only the first row of students who are really in contact with the professors. The others are, it's as if they were on Skype anyway. You're increasing the contact because the professor will take little groups of 50 and they will discuss more lively issues. The reality is that in a lecture hall of 300 at medical school, okay, Julian, we've talked about this teaching which is for the public in general. But this continuous training is something that people pay for, and they want something for their money. Is there any room for this low cost or free teaching, that's to say the online version? How could one imagine that people who actually pay for lectures are going to accept this low cost version? Well, first I'm going to try and say something that doesn't offend the technical people, because we seem to be having problems. I got into this sector in 2011, which is not long ago, and we said that we were going to bring out an online paper, and everybody told us, well, the doctors are not very rock and roll and it's not going to work. But today we have 108,000 doctors registered on the Quotidien du Médecin's site, and that means that we're using digital information. In this health sector, it's something that is obviously good, because all of the doctors are connected and ask for it. But it depends on the structure of the course. What you get in a MOOC is the resources, the teaching resources to start with, but also the explanations, the evaluation, and the interaction. And you've got to get all that in according to the contents. All this has to be available. And we think that in the health sector, we need to put in small private spots, closed communities related to the DPC in France for some modules, and more open in other cases to the other doctors, something that is paid for by the hospitals perhaps, to train doctors specifically, or by companies. But what would be really good, I think, is to be able to reason with less heterogeneity in the courses and in the way we assess the knowledge. We can find sponsors, and we can also find general interest for these online courses in training in general. You're at the Open faculty in Paris. What is open is free. What is the economic model? Who pays? Is it advertising or the government? Well, open doesn't mean free, it means online. When we created the online university, it's the first French online university, so that you didn't have to actually have a diploma. We said to ourselves, well, there's an audience of people who want to go to university but don't have access because they work, because they're abroad, because they have family or professional responsibilities to fulfill. However, there are also students who want to go for ongoing training, doctors who want to do lifelong training, and they're prepared to pay for a diploma which will enable to develop his professional career. The economic model is easy to explain. The student registers, they pay for the course, which gives them a national diploma. So it's the university that comes to the student and brings the teaching community, the educational community, because as we said earlier, when you go to university, you don't just go to wear your trousers out sitting on a bench in a lecture hall. You also go to have a coffee and to find a husband or wife. So we needed to retranscribe the online university onto the teaching platform and provide all the facilities you have at university. And that's what the student actually pays for online. Okay, so it's rather like the British Open University. Yes, absolutely. In Lausanne or at Descartes, the MOOC is free. The word open means free there. So how does Lausanne do it? Do you make any profit out of a MOOC which is totally free of charge? Well, there are several answers to that. We do make a little bit of profit. Some of the MOOCs provide verified certificates, and they pay $50 to get a slightly more reliable certificate because their identity is checked and so on. And we do have a little bit of income, and we hope to develop it. Continuous or long life training is something that is regulated by law. In Geneva, there are 8,000 taxpayers that pay taxes for the universities. Very few of them actually take advantage of the services the universities provide. So why not open it out to all the citizens in the country? We're number one in Europe in terms of MOOCs. It gives us a lot of visibility, and no other marketing campaign could have given us as much visibility. I'd like to ask Mikhail Shikrun a question. 23% of the Swiss people go to university. I get the impression that in France, you've got the what we call the digital fracture. That is to say, everybody doesn't have access to online teaching. At the end of the day, in the patient community, because you're oriented to patients' access to teaching online, are we only going to see robot or geek patients having access to these lectures? Well, we have platforms that enable the people who have chronic diseases to find information or share information with other patients. Sometimes we talk about e-patients. I don't know what an e-patient is myself. And I don't really want to make a difference between patients and e-patients. Today in France, we have 90% of the citizens who do have access to the internet. 2 patients out of 3 have regular access to the internet. And Facebook recently announced that most patients had an account on the platform. So I think that we have patients who seek information, who are going to look for a new form of information. We've talked about Uberization quite a lot since this morning. It's a term that you use for more or less everything nowadays. This isn't Uberization, but it's a sort of upheaval, revolution in the power, because you give the keys to the citizens, to the patients themselves, and on the contrary to a MOOC, in which you're still in a very vertical logic, you've got the expert or the person who knows, who gives the information to the patients. In the patient community, you see something different emerge, something horizontal in which the patients can share the knowledge they have between themselves. It probably hasn't got the same scientific value or expertise, but it does have a value all the same, because you're going to talk about everyday life, of living with the disease. So we'll have an opportunity to come back later, I expect. And a lot of things concerning the impact of the treatment and the disease on the quality of life of the patients. Pierre, do you agree about the verticality that Mikhail has just mentioned? It's the teachers who tell the others in the MOOC. Well, less and less. Originally, MOOCs were not just ex-cathedra courses, they were far more participatory. Imagine that you have a lecture, you've got the standard course at the faculty that describes symptoms, and you have 10,000 or 20,000 of examples of diseases and the influence of the treatment. So a MOOC is something that works both ways. It doesn't just broadcast information, but it gets information together from the people who participate. And there are people who come along to see what's happening. It's very, very participatory. MOOCs are also used for sales networks and customers. You get feedback, but there are no questionnaires. Everybody deletes a questionnaire when he receives one on his email. And that's the future of MOOCs, I think. Yes, I totally agree with what Pierre is saying there. Why does it apply so well to health MOOCs? Well, because I think it can be applied in other areas as well. But the people who learn become players. And in health, especially for the professionals, the doctors who are on continuous training, it seems natural to be a player in their training. Of course, you've got to accept to share the data, which is why the logic of emancipation takes time. But, as Pierre said, and quite rightly so, they're modules that are easier to digest, they're adapted. We haven't talked about the MOOC precisely, but the modules are short, they're 3 or 4 minutes. Each person does them at their own pace. And you can play them again if you want to. And you only need to take about 1 to 4 hours a week, but I think it's very suitable for health. Well, I'd like to say two things. The first thing is that I'm very struck that your questions concerning the economic model asked of those who are not actually in the teaching circles, and I think that's a problem. If you're talking about universities, standard universities, I mean, to create a digital university with these tools and the way you are going to introduce these components to the students and the teachers, there's a cost that incurs a cost, and the cost has to be borne by somebody. Who's that going to be borne by? Well, by the faculty and the educational authorities, and the academic model is not something that is questioned when you take a look at the public sector, which is rather a shame. I'd like to remind you that in France, like in other countries, the registration rights are extremely low. I think it's about 240 euros compared to £9,000 in the UK or $20,000 in Canada for a public university. So in terms of training in medical school, I think we've completely missed out in our access to continuous training years ago. An entrance into digital teaching is a unique opportunity to recover part of this continuous training, university diplomas, inter-university diplomas in ongoing training. In our universities, the IT system has to enable us to take payments online, which is another difficulty. It makes people laugh to think that it's that bad. But at the end of the day, it's an opportunity to recover reservoirs of people who would really like to participate in this adventure. And there's another point that's very important too. That was a question that arose immediately in the MOOCs, and that was, how do we assess these studies? Because the think tank on evaluation is something that we're going to have to hold before we convert the lectures and courses. If we do traditional evaluation with a course that's been completely changed, it's not going to work. Well, that's all very interesting. You can see that difficulty in the MOOCs is adapting to an environment that wasn't the original environment. It was something that we saw in the video. First of all, it was a marketing tool for the big universities in America, and it's a tool that has a certain amount of influence, which is why we need to launch ourselves off into that adventure, because we need to have influence on the world on the basis of our own legal system. MOOCs were not thought out as being a profitable tool to start with, nor a profit-making tool, nor an assessment tool that would be used to give diplomas. We thought we could use them otherwise as tools, and although the MOOC is and remains a tool, its use is extremely broad-reaching because it will be of benefit to us in the future. I'd just like to make a comment on what Michael said about the verticality and horizontality of knowledge. There's a verticality in the knowledge and a horizontality in the use of it. There's a researcher who published some in-depth research on economic issues, and he got his students together and said, how am I going to be able to use this so that everybody who wants to get onto the work market can use it and make it bankable and profitable? when the law on the autonomy of the universities was voted, one of the challenges was to give them the possibility to sign contracts on research tools with corporations. And there's an exchange there, those who, that because they benefit from the knowledge which they can use. There are two sorts of university. Those who say we don't know where MOOCs are heading, we don't know how to make money with them, we don't know how to do the exams, so we won't go for it. And there are the others who say we don't know where we're heading, so we'll go as fast as we can because we've got to learn. That's our culture. Universities have to take risks. If the university don't take risks, they're not worth being called university. And secondly, because there's no point in creating national commissions like you did in France, or think tanks, or do tests and analysis. I've been in the area since 1984. That's how you say it in French, isn't it? No, not 74, 84. And I didn't see anything coming along. I've been teaching online since 1994. And all of a sudden we have 180,000 people registered, including Americans. And a lot of these MOOCs are in French. I saw nothing. There's no point in creating think tanks. You've just got to do it as quickly as you can and get as much experience as you can whilst doing it. And just to end, because we've talked a lot about Uberization this morning, and we also talked about the Kodak syndrome. That is to say that we're the best. MOOCs are not really of a very good standard. Traditional film is good, said Kodak. Look at digital film as any old thing. And my colleagues said to me, there's nothing like chalk and a blackboard. They're the Kodak people. They can't think outside the box. And I think there are a lot of universities that are like that. They're sort of a blindfold, and the world is changing fast, and those who go for it are going to survive, and the others will have to come to Switzerland. Before everybody here becomes Swiss, let's hand over to Michael. I'd like to bounce back on what he's just said. Is very, very interesting, because it doesn't really matter whether things are vertical or horizontal. We're in the era of open knowledge. Everybody knows, and knowledge is for all. And in point of fact, there is expert knowledge, and there's also the layman's information, and the new trend in which the patients can express their views through communities like the startup that I represent, but also Doctissimo and Facebook and other forums, show that there are different ways of expressing their views. But why are they sharing this knowledge? What's the use of it? Well, of course, we have people who come online to not be isolated, to find information that you don't necessarily want to ask your doctor, either because you haven't thought of it or you don't have time because a consultation only lasts about 12 minutes. But in actual fact, we've got to stop acting according to the old format to know what's legitimate or not, because we realize that with the new technologies we have a generation of a new type of data from real life. And I love that term, real life. The health users, the patient's real life. The whole issue is to know what you should do with it and what you're going to do with this new information and this new data. Gerard would like to come back to the concept of open knowledge and the very mixed audience. In the MOOCs on Ebola that we did with the University of Geneva and Paris Descartes, I remember a participant who said, you used an acronym. What is DNA? How can you get participants that are lay persons and have no medical culture whatsoever, and doctors who are students and have 12 years study behind them, and you're going to give a diploma to? Well, I don't think we mix them up. We put together a certain number of audiences and a way of merging knowledge which doesn't necessarily go together. But I go on blogs and forums, and very often I'm very happy to know how I can remove the spots from my shoe by using sugar or something like that. And that's something I can find on a forum or a blog. And as usual, on the internet in general, the information is abundant. There's a lot of it around, and it's not sorted out at all. It may be right and it may not be right. Health blogs are terrifying, and it's very interesting because the patients are able to feel that they're not alone, and that's important too. But once again, it's not sorted out and the information is not in the right order, and we need to send a message, not of our stamp on the knowledge, but something that comes from somebody who does know, because it's really in that spirit that we're doing it. So I think that there's room, although it's not the right expression maybe, for products to attract people. And in terms of vocational training, I think that the MOOC is something that attracts people. But behind that, you've got to have a reverse class concept, of course, another way of going to get knowledge. We call it the reverse class because it's chic and it's digital. But 30 years ago, there were Cherbourg and Maastricht who were already teaching learning by problems with software package and paper and pencil, and by little groups we went off to find the knowledge and bring it back, and we put it all in the middle of the table and we sorted it out. And the reversed classroom is not that far away, and it uses, the difference being that it uses modern tools. But I think there's room for these broad communities with people who know and don't know and work together. And there's also room for the small closed communities we've talked about. There the approach is going to be completely different because it's more an approach of professionalization. But the underlying thing in all cases is the tools. If we don't use the new tools, we're going to die. Julian, I'd like to add that what I find striking is that the history of MOOC affects the universities more than it does health. It's the history of all things digital. All of a sudden there's a capacity to contact more people and have more influence and clout, as you said so rightly. We launched training programs using digital media, and it comes a new teaching tool with different modules and ways of learning. And it's going to be a revolution in training in general. And at the end of the day, it's also going to affect initial training, not only ongoing training. Today, we're thinking about something that is core for our society, which is teaching. At the beginning, we thought that it might be useful, but things are going so quickly and people improve it all the time. It's rather like Uber, because the people from G7 have to put their tyres back on. The difference is that all of a sudden we've changed our passive students into students who are living an adventure, and they're happy to participate in the changes. It was very spectacular at Paris Descartes. As soon as we started holding workshops in which the students were as many a number as the other participants, we changed things considerably. Pierre, I think you ought to make a comment on what was said in the little film, because I know that the Polytechnic School in Lausanne has made an effort to aim at French-speaking Africa. There's a lot of teaching material in French available, and there's very little on the internet. So having the French-speaking MOOCs was an idea to get to French-speaking Africa. It's fine, but there's no broadband in Africa. So what do you think about that? Well, first of all, I'd like to make a comment on initial and lifelong training. 2/3 of our students have a bachelor's or master's degree, and over a third have a job. So we're doing continuous training without actually knowing it. The distinction has sort of evaporated and you've lost control, but you've got to accept that. We all like control. We like to control things and make sure that everything's in order, but we've lost the control. There are people who are coming along who've aren't the people we're used to. You've got to accept that. There are 600 million, there will be 600 million French speakers in Africa in 2020, and 2/3 of the MOOC are in French, 1/3 in English, but always subtitled in the other language. And nevertheless, if you take a look at the African statistics, you'll see that the French-speaking MOOCs have a huge impact in that part of Africa. And there's no broadband. So we're working on it. Google said they'd put balloons all over the place in the sky, but for the moment we haven't seen any. We've seen somebody fixing a satellite dish on the campus. And we've got the teachers from the universities to come over to us. And they talk to the teachers who did the MOOC, and sometimes they even record a part themselves. And we said, oh dear me, this is going to be colonization again. No, Switzerland's never colonized anybody, so it can't be colonization again. Perhaps we're colonizing, but it's not new colonization. But the problem's difficult, but we're working on it. Okay, so these MOOCs are very promising. Having said that, if you take a look at the statistics of the MOOCs, you'll see that some of the tests say that there are only about 5% of the people who actually ever get a diploma. Some say 10%, but this doesn't happen in universities. People don't just leave like that. There's not a 95% attrition rate. So why are the MOOCs not done properly? Why are there so few people at the arrival? We have 1 million registered, 55,000 certificates awarded. So you're not lying there. About 1/3 of the people who register, take a look at the first video. The first part of fluid dynamics is a nice looking guy. He looks as if he came from Club Med, and it seems wonderful. And then you go into the first really serious course and you've got equations a meter long. So either it's too difficult or too simple. It's not what he wanted, but it doesn't matter. They gave us their email address. And 1/3 take the MOOCs like a wiki. They say, oh, well, I haven't abandoned. I followed that course 10 years ago. It's just that I came back to get this bit. And a lot of the people who follow MOOCs are teachers who come and get ideas and find examples. And another 1/3 want to do the certificate, and a lot don't succeed. Every week it means 4 to 5 hours, and it's difficult when you've got a wife and children and a dog to walk. It's a lot of work. The courses are difficult. They're at the same level as the EPFL courses, so it's something meaty you've got to get your teeth in. And in terms of statistics in law at the university, only 25% of the patients who register in the first year get their diploma. So the attrition rate is considerable there as well. At the online university, we've been working for a year, and those who register in September, 50 left because they considered they didn't have time, and 40 only sat the examination. So it's rather like sham 2015. The virtual creates real, and it really creates something that's superior to real university at the end of the day. For the student to stay and remain registered for the complete course, you've got to have teachers to mediate, and you've got to have an educational community. And it's all these interactions that are going to create the discussion, human reality, the fact that the students do actually find something that is like the university, something social, which enables them to acquire the knowledge that they need. Those who pay $50 to start with go farther. 83% of them go to the end. are you ready in your faculty to make a MOOC something that gives you a diploma? Can you accept that as a unit of value of teaching? Well, that's probably not the basic part of the issue. Why not? If it's well coached and there are people to supervise. It's like when you're on a diet. A lot of people lose weight, but they go back to their initial weight after several weeks. The difference is coaching. If you want to go to the very end of a MOOC and make it into a diploma, there are a series of precautions that you've got to take. I don't know if you should open it out broadly to or restrict it to smaller communities. But if the goal is to manufacture professionals in health, since we're talking about health, I think there's a minimum amount of precautions you need to take. But what I'd like to bounce back to is the way we assess during a MOOC or during a learning session, whatever it be. Because I'm very struck by how rigid our way of assessing the students is. It's like high maths. You've got the session in June and the session in September, and it's not practical for the students, and it's not practical for the teachers, and it's not even practical for the people who work in the administrations of the schools. So I think that we are going to come to more flexibility in the way we assess, and those tools will enable us to do that. In a MOOC, the student can test his or her knowledge and have that knowledge validated at their own pace. And we're far from that in initial training, and there's no obstacle whatsoever. There's no formal obstacle to that. There's nothing dogmatic to stop you doing it, except for the fact that it's something we don't do now and it's going to be complicated. We've talked about the professionals, but if I'm a doctor and I want to add to my training, that's wonderful because I can use it like a wiki, but it's much better than a wiki because it's been thought out and structured. And doctors say to me, I used to go and take a look on Google and get articles, and then I lost them all because I changed my computer. So you can see that there's something that's been adapted, teaching tools that are going to be very useful. There's very little time left. Could you each conclude on the theme of whether we are actually participating in a revolution of our universities, and is this going to be the new Amazon at the universities and perhaps even replace them? Sarah, no, Google will wait. They're looking at the children who play and don't know what's going to happen. I think that MOOC is a phenomenon that's going to develop, and MOOCs don't matter, they'll develop. Our MOOCs are entirely digital today, but everything's digital, the train, the door openers, everything else. You've got to stop trying to slow things down and digging your heels in. You've got to embrace the change. We haven't talked about epidemiology today, but we've got our colleague Marcel Salati, who does epidemiology and predicts the effects of some drugs, such as the drugs that are developed for AIDS. And the MOOCs aspect is only a small part of all this. It's true that all things digital are going to make practices change, and the mindsets and the business models will have to change too. I've seen a reversal of the trend. That's to say that we've gone from open knowledge to open research. Let me explain. The patient communities and the forums are moderated, and if the moderation is of a good standard and there's an ethics charter on the platform, you'll see that the data that's generated can be aggregated once it's generated and will be transmitted to the public and private players in the health sector much faster than when you set up an observational study or a clinical study. And this real-life data will provide a quantity of new information with no restriction for all the players in research and the health industry. And that's our economic model. It's something that's very striking, that was born in the US some years ago and is arriving now in Europe and France, with, at long last, health professionals that are stopping thinking for the patient, and the patient will be able to tell us about the way they take their drugs and how his or her disease has impacted their professional life, their social life, their intimate life. So all this information is something extra that we have, in addition to the information we get from the searchers and the doctors. Well, there have been several stages in handing on knowledge, orally and in written form, and now virtually. And none of these different methods has really replaced the other. And I don't think digital transmission is going to replace the others either. It's an extra tool that we have to adopt as quickly as possible, because if we don't, it's going to be imposed on us from outside. And this brings me back to what we said earlier, that's to say the issue of influence and our research capacity. And this is why the MOOCs and the existing teaching which transmits learning is an extra tool which is not going to replace the two previous ones. Internet is a tool. It's an extra tool which we need to use in the future. Gérard. In a university or medical school, there are three essential things. We have to validate the contents, which we're trying to hand down to the students, get the teachers to buy in to a teaching project, because we can't do it without the students either, and all of the contents has to be validated through partnerships. And if we can do all this, then we've got to go as fast as possible. And this is a revolution that can be operated in one session at a university. We probably didn't answer the question of the economic model. We hope we're going to find one. But the thing is, the more users that you have, the more likelihood there is that you'll find one. The OECD can make mistakes, they have already done that, but they're saying that French is going to be one of the most widely spoken languages in the world in the near future. Well, it's already spoken a lot in Africa. So if you put that into the shaker, it's a way of finding an economic model that'll work, and people who can learn in French. Well, thank you for that very much indeed. Just let me advertise, because we have an extra minute and a half because of the blackout, and we have Paco from the University of Geneva in this room. Register for his course, and we'll go on to the next debate, which is on agriculture.